Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to our webinar today. My name is Kristina Dooley, and I am the founder of Estrela Consulting, a college planning firm based in Ohio with consultants around other parts of the country. And we're thrilled to have you here with us tonight. I'm excited because today is May 2nd, and I think probably the folks on the screen, especially my friend Cathy Davenport, who I'll introduce in a second, are incredibly happy that it's May 2nd. This basically signals that our seniors, our class of 2023 students, should have by now, for the most part, made their college decisions and sent in an enrollment deposit in form of some sort. And so we're happy to have you here tonight for this incredibly timely short webinar. We will attempt to keep this about 30 minutes long. And what we're going to do tonight is we are going to share some what's next tips for you. So students making a big college decision, that's a huge hurdle to get over, obviously, during this process, but there are still a lot of things left to do. And so we want to make sure that everybody knows exactly what happens after a student decides where they're going to go. And so tonight, I'm so excited. I have worked with both of these women in the past. We've presented before, and I asked them just a few weeks ago, can we reassemble the band and share this knowledge that we have about the next steps in this process with families who might be maybe just slightly stressed about what they're doing. So tonight, or if you're watching this recording, this is totally relevant information for parents and students alike, as well as school counselors, independent counselors. If you're watching, absolutely information that you can share with anybody who you think could use a little bit of help in this space. So tonight I have Cathy Davenport, who is the VP of Enrollment from Dickinson College, and I have Elizabeth Pyle, who is the president of College Success Plan, and both of them will share some tips in just a few minutes. I'm going to kick us off first with some actual tangible, really timely, important things that need to be done immediately. And by immediately, some of these I mean like within the next few days or week. So don't panic. You have a little bit of time, a few days a week, and other things that really should be done over about the next month or so. So first, now that your child, or if you're a student watching this, now that you've made your college decision, one of the most important things is that you have very likely been accepted to other schools as well. And it's important that you notify those schools of your intention to not enroll in those schools. You may be hearing from friends at school who have been put on wait lists, as an example. You want to free up some spots for those students. If you're not taking up those spots, let the admission officers know so that they can remove you from their list. It also just helps in terms of communication. They can remove you so that you're not receiving continued requests. Are you coming? Are you coming? Let them know. I should say that notification should actually be also coupled with a thank you. Thank you for the generous offer of admission and potentially a scholarship if you've received one. It's always good to leave things on good footing with any of the schools that have accepted you. So feel free to do that. You can do it by email. You can send a message through your admission portal if they've given you an option to decline enrollment that way. So that's the most timely thing. Please do that as soon as possible if you haven't done that already. The next thing that's a very timely thing that you need to do is you need to let your school-based counselor know where you are going to school. Your high school needs to know where they need to send final transcripts at the end of the school year. There's some other things that they just need to put into their system. So please don't ghost them now that you've been accepted and enrolled somewhere. Let them know where you're going. I'll speak selfishly on behalf of the independent counselors that might be watching as well. If you've worked with an independent counselor, please let them know as well. If you haven't told them where you're going, that would be very helpful. I mentioned saying thank you to the schools that have accepted you and you're not intending to enroll. There are a couple other people I want you to do some immediate thank yous to in the coming weeks before you graduate from school. And I know that's coming very quickly for some of you. In between proms and end of year things, take a few minutes to send some thank you notes. They can be paper notes. They can also be a simple email to anybody who's written a letter of recommendation for you this year. If it was a teacher, if it was your orchestra director, if it was your employer, your school counselor, anybody who helped you in some way through this process, please say thank you. That is a really small gesture, but it is absolutely important because all of those folks played some kind of a role in where you are right now. So please take the time to do that. And parents, if you're watching, you can nudge your children to do that. And I will put a plug in for paper thank yous. I love paper thank you notes, you know, a card, those are really nice. But if it's an email, that's okay too. You can do that. The next couple tips I'm going to give you are probably not super fun ones, but ones that are incredibly important. And that is some of the documents that you will need that are legal documents, not fun stuff to talk about, but things that are a reality in terms of necessity. And we often tell our families at Estrela that some of these documents you might be thinking, oh, we probably wouldn't need that. Why would we need that? You don't ever want to be in a situation where you would need it and you don't have it signed or you don't have the form completed. So a couple of things I'll mention, and I'll be mentioning these kind of quickly, but I will say that after this webinar, the three of us are putting our tips down on a document for you. So we'll actually have a handout that'll go with the recording of this. So we'll share that through our Estrela LinkedIn account as well as our Estrela Facebook page. And anybody who's watching this who gets a link to the recording, you'll get a copy of it as well. But there's 4 documents I really want to point out. The first is the HIPAA authorization form. And while what the HIPAA authorization form is this is a form that actually allows schools and others to disclose medical information to a parent of a child who is 18 or older. And it's important to know that when your child turns 18, many things that you had access to before in terms of information is no longer accessible to you unless they've granted you some permissions. So this HIPAA form is one of those forms. And again, I'll mention this is disclosure of medical information that is not an allowance for you to give medical directives. I'll get into that in a second. The second is something called a FERPA release form, FERPA. Some of you may remember signing this, waiving your rights to, your rights on the FERPA form that was on your common application if you were applying for admission in the fall, if you were a student. And basically, the FERPA release form actually allows parents to access the student's grades, financial aid information, housing. It's a Privacy Act form. So if you do not have a FERPA release form, I'm sorry, parents, if you call the school and you ask for a copy of your child's college transcript, you will not be granted access to that. They have to have that FERPA release form on file that you've been granted permission to receive that information, to view that information. Sometimes parents will ask, well, what if I'm paying tuition? Can't I see that form? Can't I see that information? No, you cannot. If you have not completed that form, you cannot. The next one, I know I'm going through these quick. So again, the recording will be available so you can get these later. The durable power of attorney, a form which will allow you to actually make financial decisions on behalf of your student. This is exceptionally important if your child at some point is going to be studying abroad, as an example, or leaving the country for some reason. If you need to access their credit card information, anything that has to do with their finances, their bank account information, if they have their own bank account, this is what you would need to be able to access that. The fourth form is what I referenced earlier, the healthcare proxy, or also called a medical power of attorney. This is different than the HIPAA form because this actually does let you make medical decisions on behalf of your student. So I actually just last week received a text message from a former colleague of mine who told me that her friend has a child in college who had a medical issue and could not access any of the information, could not help make any decisions about what was happening with the child medically. If your child ends up in the hospital, if your child's unable to communicate, there are things that you would really like to do as a parent, I'm sure, and you will not have the ability to do that if you don't have this form completed. The one thing I will say is many of these forms are state specific. You have to have the right form for the right state. So if your child is going out of state, you should actually have this form completed both for your home state and the state in which their institution is located. So just something to keep in mind. I'll put a plug in for a company, an online resource called Mama Bear Legal Forms. If anyone has heard of those, it's actually a legitimate website where you can actually go on and pay a small fee, and they have template forms for you there. They can help you with that. It may cause you to have some peace of mind that you know that all those things are being done well. You can also certainly contact your attorney if you have a family attorney who can help you with these things. But don't push these off as something like, oh, that may not happen to us. We don't really need that immediately. This should be done before your child goes to school. So I will say before I'm going to pass it over to Elizabeth, but before I do that, as we go through these tips, please put any questions that you have into the Q&A, and I will monitor the Q&A, and at the end we'll circle back and answer any questions that come up. But please ask them. We will try our best to answer them. We are 3 experts from 3 different kind of specialty areas, so hopefully one of us will be able to answer something for you. But without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Elizabeth from College Success Plan with some additional tips.
And thank you, Kristina. So many really good ideas and exciting things to do. And with all of this comes the opportunity to be looking at your college website. So going to the school website, your student should be doing this. And we are experts at keeping students on track. And part of that is the students taking ownership of their responsibilities. So anything that the student can do this summer on their own to get ready for college, I would definitely encourage that. So checking out the school website, seeing how it works, finding out how to set up your school email, because that is going to be where students are getting all of their information as soon as they accept, actually. So encouraging your students to be checking this new school email really every day, because deadlines are going to come up, and we'll talk about that in a second, but you want to be reading your emails. So that's a really important thing, and figuring out how the school website works. You'll also be getting information at this time for orientation, which is super exciting, but also can create some anxiety for students. So reading all the emails that come, finding out exactly what the schedule is going to be for orientation. And if you can go in person, I would definitely encourage that. And as Kristina was talking about with the FERPA and a lot of those forms, parents can sign those at orientation. So you have an opportunity to do that. So if parents can go to the orientation, that's great too. You can also do it online. But we like to do one-stop shopping and get it all done at orientation. So when the students are getting those emails, they'll find out what orientation is going to consist of and all the things that are expected of them, if they're going to be sleeping in a dorm or if it's just a day program, that sort of thing. And knowing what to expect for them will, keep them excited, but also, take away some of the maybe anxiety or uncertainty of it. At orientation, typically students have an opportunity to register for classes. So this is something that is an underestimated task during the summer, and we like to give it a lot of attention because this is an opportunity for a student to set up for success for their semester. So learning what requirements they'll need for first year and going through all of those requirements online. Everything's on the school website. So that's why I started with that one, get used to the school website, and having the students look at the classes. And I'm sure Cathy can attest to that. We want students to be looking at all the classes themselves because they're the ones registering. And if something goes wrong, maybe the first week of school, as far as their classes, they'll know where to check online and maybe, put a different class in and drop a class, but they have to know how to do all of that. And taking the time to look at all the classes over the summer, I highly recommend. And having a plan A, B, and C for potential classes in case some are filled up, because that does happen. But there's a solution to every situation. So if you have a backup class, no problem. And the time with the advisor during orientation, you can ask questions, but it goes so much more smoothly if you're prepared and have a really good idea of what classes that you want to sign up for. So then your advisor can basically sign off on all of that. Learning your school management system. So there's 4 basic ones, Canvas, D2L, Blackboard, and Google Classroom. Schoolology are some of the ones that schools, colleges use, but learning which one your school uses and getting accustomed to it, because there's going to be so much going on the first week of school. That's exciting. If you know how to use your school learning management system ahead of time, I promise that's going to make everything go more smoothly. So taking time in the summer when you're relaxed and sitting in your family room and just kind of surfing it is a really good idea. And also some of the class syllabi after you register, some get posted early and you can just see, you know, what expectations are for particular classes. Taking time also over the summer to browse any clubs or activities, because typically schools have over 100 of those. So finding 1 or 2 or 3 that you're interested in is great. And we encourage students to go to those meetings in the beginning of school. Not that you're going to definitely commit to a certain club, but you might meet your new best friend there because it's someone that's also having similar interests as you may have. So taking the time to see what your school has. And again, that's going to make school more fun too. Completing any required online mini classes that can be done in the summer. They typically have like an alcohol awareness one, drugs one. They have all different ones. So typically about 3 or 4 that they have. Again, those can be taken at home over the summer. And they're sometimes 1 to 3 hours. So you want to get that done so you're not in your dorm room the first week of school, sitting there while everyone doing those classes, those mini classes, while everyone else is outside in the dorm, you know, meeting each other and, you know, getting accustomed to school. So we like to take care of anything we can over the summer beforehand. Choosing a planner. So like Kristina, she likes paper thank you notes. I totally agree with that. And we love paper planners. So everything, so much has gone digital, but retention of information, and actually sitting down and planning things. So writing it in paper is, you know, a great way to go. If you want to use Google Calendar and other things, that's of course fine. It's your choice. But if getting a paper planner over the summer is great. And cleaning out and organizing your computer, now's the time to do that, because you know, you want to keep your computer as clean as possible because you're going to have all new information. If you're getting a new computer, I would check your school website, because a lot of times you get discounts on that. And also any information that needs to be downloaded on your computer, any programs, do that in the summer, because as we know, that can take like overnight. So get that all organized. Checking out your campus map where everything is. And if you qualify for accommodations, please take care of all of that over the summer. Again, when you get to school, you're not going to want to deal with that. A lot of that can be done online, but also in person at orientation. So there you go, setting up for success. And Cathy, now once they get to school, they get to see you.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. And thank you, Kristina. Yeah, so absolutely, you know, kind of preparation, and the preparation still leads into staying there, right? You know, I sometimes say to students, getting into college may have seemed like the hardest thing you've done, until staying in college becomes the hardest thing that you will do next. And I say that with humor to a certain degree, because now that we're on May 2nd, you know, it kind of does feel like, whew, okay, great. But if you're a high school senior, there's not a lot of time left between now and the end of the academic year to wrap up all those last things that will be happening as you prepare for your new first things that will be happening. So many of the things that Kristina and Elizabeth have said are really critical. And I've kind of broken this down into some information for parents and some information for the student going off to school. And summer's a great time to start or continue these conversations. Parents, you've heard a little bit about FERPA, in particular, the Family Educational Right and Privacy Act. We cannot have conversations with families once a student arrives on campus that maybe you were having with the admissions office, as an example, or the financial aid office, as an example, when the student was a prospective student and not yet matriculated. If you want to be able to continue to have some of those conversations, whether it's regarding finances, whether it's regarding health and wellness, there has to be a signed FERPA form in order for that to happen. And I appreciate what Kristina had to say about some additional forms, because you don't want to need them in a hurry and not have them already in place. So good to be thinking about that right now. This summer and leading into beyond, if your son or daughter has a pre-existing health condition, as an example, or some mental health needs, some learning needs, these are all things to be discussing during the summer to make sure that, one, information is current and up to date. And if it's going to be released to someone on the college campus, perhaps an access and disability services area, or a learning support center, or a health center on campus, that information is ready to go. It's current. It's up to date. If there's medications involved, if there's any special circumstances that need to be known, that is all ready to go. I know sometimes families try and request housing accommodations or dietary needs and so forth. It is a lot easier to work with a dining services team or a health and wellness team when the information is up to date. They may or may not be able to make every single accommodation. Sometimes things that you've received during the high school years may or may not fall into the college category. When you turn 18, when you leave 12th grade, there are things that change. And so very important that families begin to, again, look at the websites, understand what the processes are, and work early to get those things submitted. My final, statement for parents, being a parent myself, is don't be a fixer. It's really easy when a phone call comes in or a text message comes in about no one's helping me, or I don't understand this. Rather than look for the solution yourself, encourage your son or daughter to use the resources around them to figure that out. Okay, you're having a challenge perhaps with a roommate. Have you had a conversation with your roommate? Have you, had a mediation conversation? Have you talked with the resident assistant? Have you gone to the housing office and tried to negotiate? What are the concerns? Because sometimes it's something that just wasn't communicated well, and sometimes it's a bigger issue. But if you start with the communication conversation, everybody seems to benefit better from that rather than someone else swooping in to try and make it better. That's a learning tool. It's a growth opportunity. Challenges are hard, but I think, we want our students to be able to navigate through the channels that are appropriate as they continue to grow and mature. And we're giving them the support to be able to do that. The same is true with an academic issue. Are you using resources at your disposal? So if you didn't do as well as you would have liked on that first paper or that first quiz or that first test, did you meet with a faculty member during office hours? Did you meet with the perhaps teaching assistant that runs that section of the lab? Have you gone to any of the resource sessions that might be offered? Have you gone to the writing center or the tutoring center? What all of these tools and resources that colleges and universities offer, we don't just like to talk about them because they're there. We want to talk about them because people use them and they find it to be helpful and successful in what they're trying to accomplish. So those are some additional pieces. For the students in particular, I really want to echo what Elizabeth said about email. That is the mode of communication on a college campus. That's the business mode of communication. So you're going to get information from the registrar. The registrar is in charge of courses and grades and making sure records are accurate. You're going to get information from perhaps student housing. So pay attention to email. And when you have a request to complete something, please do, probably before the deadline. Sometimes students, great example, a student will say, well, I decided I didn't want to take that class anymore. Okay, did you do the official thing, which was perhaps withdraw from the course? Because guess what? If you didn't do those official steps that were asked of you, you get an F, a failure for that course, because no one knows that you withdrew because you didn't do the formal piece. So don't be caught in the circumstance of a professor reaching out and saying, I haven't seen you in class. You've missed this quiz, you've missed this test. Or the registrar's office saying, we show you as registered, but not completing. Because once it's on your record, it's harder to go back and get it removed. And it may not get removed. And then that 0 goes into your total credits, which really hurts your GPA, your grade point average. Also really important, I think, for all students to read a lot during the summer. So do it for fun, pick great things. I mean, classes in college, the pace can be quicker or as quick as some of the courses you've had in high school. And the amount of reading you may need to do for a course, or the amount of paper writing you may need to do for a course. It's kind of like preparing for a marathon. You don't want to take the summer off and then just decide, oh, I can run that marathon. No problem. It's been 4 months since I've exercised. It's the same thing. Do a lot of good reading during the summer. Keep yourself active and engaged. Another piece that I think is really critical. I talked about communication earlier and a roommate as an example, but expect that you're going to be living with others, community living in college, right? You may have one roommate, you may have 2 roommates. It depends on the residence area that you'll be living in, but you'll be living in a floor or in a community with others. And so mutual respect, organization, being able to speak about preferences, how you prefer to be with another person or sharing a space. Not a lot of students have had to share spaces coming from their own home into a community area. And so navigating those conversations are important. Having people visit. My eldest son went to a large university with, every weekend they had people stay with them for football games. As long as everybody's talking about it and they're agreeing to it, great. But if you don't feel comfortable with that, make sure you express your opinion in an appropriate way so that you can find a good way to manage that particular outcome. The last piece that Elizabeth had also talked about was requesting courses. Most colleges and universities will also accept advanced placement credit or international baccalaureate credit, or perhaps dual enrollment credits coming from high school. Really important that students have that information as part of their record with the registrar. One, you may have credits coming in that will allow you to fulfill requirements at the 100 level of courses to get you into a program or major sooner. Or secondly, it could be an opportunity for some students to double major and be able to better plan their 4 years of study or to study abroad. And for some students, it may be, from a financial perspective, a way to graduate early and be able to think about that piece. So make sure that information gets shared appropriately with folks so that you don't retake courses you've already taken in high school, but you also could get credit for things that you've done, which gives you more leeway and opportunity in some other things. So I agree with everything that Kristina and Elizabeth shared earlier. I think those are continuation pieces, but once you're there, how to stay there and be successful, communicate and use the resources around you.
Thank you. These are all wonderful, tangible tips. We have a couple of questions that I'm going to throw to you guys to answer. This one actually is for you, Cathy. So you mentioned roommates, and the question is, in terms of the selection of roommates, do you recommend students use the class Facebook page, or should they just go random? What have you seen? Because I know you've seen a lot.
Yes, I've seen the total random where, there used to be a paper form where you kind of filled out, are you messy? Are you neat? Are you late night? Are you early morning? And we always hope that students complete that information, not parents, not who you think your child is, but who your child really is. So we'd like the student to complete that. I think from talking to our own housing folks, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other as far as success. I've seen a lot more of students, it's kind of the dating app, right? Swiping right or swiping left if there's somebody who has similar interests and preferences, and then kind of, speed dating, having a quick conversation to see if they would work out. That seems to be appropriate for first years. But I've also seen other students just say, you know what, as long as it's somebody in this academic area of interest or from my home area, I think I'll be comfortable with that. We have seen circumstances where friends from high schools, go off together and it goes south pretty quickly because they just don't engage with others. So, again, know yourself and decide what you're more comfortable with. Would you rather have a little more control and therefore engage with meeting people through Facebook or class pages? Or are you okay with somebody else making those assignments? I think that's up to the individual student.
Great recommendations. This next one is for you, Elizabeth. In terms of accommodations, I know Cathy mentioned, and you mentioned in terms of the accommodations could be slightly different in terms of college, but who do you recommend students reach out to if they do need some kind of accommodations? Where are they asking on campus? Are they calling their admission rep? Are they reaching out to another office?
So they go to the Student Disability Services Center, or sometimes it's called the Student Success Center. And so they'll be a head of that department, and then you'll meet with an advisor within the SDS office. It is up to the students to take care of all of that, though, as far as submitting all the information, a recent neuropsych, but typically between 1 and 3 years. And requesting any accommodations, and then following through the first week of school, going back into the office and saying, hi, introduce yourself again. I was here during orientation, and I just want to make sure everything's set up. And then each school handles it differently, how you're going to use the accommodations. But get that all set up definitely over the summer at the Student Disability Services.
Good advice. Okay, one final question. Unless others have questions, please throw them in the Q&A. And I'll take this one, actually, is about keeping up on campus safety once your child is there. How do you keep in touch? How do you know what's happening on campus? We unfortunately hear a lot about incidents on campuses, and I know parents, especially if their children are going far, sometimes have concerns about that, and how do they know what's happening in real time? I will put a plug in and say that just about 3 months ago, we were really fortunate to host the director of campus safety from Case Western Reserve University here in Cleveland. And during that discussion, his piece of advice was very much like what Elizabeth is saying in terms of get things done before the school year begins. One of his recommendations was when you go for those orientation sessions, make sure that if they don't bring it up to the parents in the parent portion, that you ask, how do I sign up for the text alerts, the campus safety text alerts, which most schools have now, so that you can be updated in real time. The other piece that he strongly recommended, and this is going further into the whole time that your child is in school, is to make sure that if there's something that you get an alert about, that you are following the information coming directly from the school versus, obviously in this age that we live in, there's a lot of things that get posted on social media, often misinformation. And he said, he wished that he could just drive home to parents. You will be notified in real time of actual things happening and what, in terms of the actual reality of things happening on the campus. And so, that was something that he wanted to make sure that families knew. The other thing he said, and this goes along the lines of one of the things I mentioned earlier, is if you have a concern about your child and you are hoping that you are able to reach out to find out what's happening with your child, if you think they might be ill, in danger, anything. I mean, we have so many things that can happen. But he said that actually, if you contact a campus safety office, they will do a check-in on a student. They may not be able to tell you what happens from that check-in if you don't have those forms signed. But he said, if you ever have a concern as a parent or a caregiver to a student about their safety on campus, you can absolutely contact the public safety office and they will check in on a student if you haven't heard from your child, not in one day, but Cathy would probably give the advice, let your children have a little bit of space. But if you have, certainly valid concerns, don't hesitate to do that. We do have one more question, and I'll ask this of you, Cathy. Question came in. Do you recommend a single room for someone who may be more challenged socially? And actually, Elizabeth, you could also chime in. Should a student who has maybe some social apprehension, should they have a single room, or do you think that it may be good for them to attempt to have a roommate and see how that goes? Cathy, go ahead.
Yeah, it may be hard to get singles, to be quite honest. So I
Good
think it's going to depend on the college or university, and what is available, what housing types might be available. I do think it's going to be important. Again, I joke about this, but students will say to me, "Oh, I love being in a community of one," and I'm like, "What? What does that mean?" No, you're going to be engaging with others, and so most colleges are going to have students in, double settings or traditional first year housing types of things. And so expect to have a roommate and how to prepare and manage that. The other piece is if you're, even if you're on a hall, sometimes it's harder for a student if they're in a single to feel connected. Because the roommates, especially at the start of the year, roommates, hallmates, they may all go off to meals and events and activities together. And it's not that they're choosing to leave you behind. It's just, you're not kind of engaged with the group. So I think that's a discussion point to have about living in a residential environment.
And that can be an accommodation, actually, just because we were talking about that before, is if, there is some extenuating circumstances, like really extenuating circumstances, you can ask that as an accommodation. So, and the other thing that you've all touched on is that to remind the students that deadlines are deadlines. So when you have a housing deadline or class registration or orientation deadline to sign up for things, those are deadlines. And that's one thing that I've seen in the last couple of years with COVID is deadlines are extended in schools, K through 12 really. And you don't really have to hand things in on time, or you get extra time to finish projects. In college, deadlines are deadlines. And oftentimes if you miss them, you're kind of arguing with a computer sometimes, and it makes so much more work for you that I just really encourage you to hand things in on time, register for things on time, because they're not the same situation as in high school when you could go to your guidance counselor and say, oh, can I get an extension for this? So just to remember that's a big change.
Deadlines are not suggestions,
Yes.
right? That's what I tell my own children. Well, we have one more thing. It's actually not a question, but some really great additional tips. So I commented back to the person who shared that I would share them. So really good point to make sure that your children are have financial acumen in terms of, do they have a credit card or a debit card? How should they be using that or not using that? So going over the realities of some of those things, like don't sign up for the credit cards on the beach in Daytona during spring break, just for the free t-shirt, that kind of stuff. Not that anyone on this screen, I'm certain, has ever done something like that. Also things like transportation. There was a mention in making sure that your child, if they're planning to not have a car on campus, do they know the transportation system getting to and from either local things like local stores, banks, etc., but also rideshare things like, do they have a Lyft account or an Uber account do they have the app on their phone? Do they know how to use it? And even if I mentioned cars, if you're planning to bring a car to campus, understanding that as well is something that you should be asking about during orientation. Is it worthwhile to bring a car, or will it sit in a parking lot about a half a mile to a mile off campus? Potentially. And so is it worthwhile for you to have one at all? And then the other thing, which I totally agree with, how to do laundry. Spend some time this summer educating your children how to do the laundry. Most schools actually now offer free laundry, which is amazing, or many do. And also there's really cool apps that tell you when your laundry is finished, and you can go in and put it in the dryer. You no longer have to sit in the laundry room like many of us used to have to do. There was one question just about those forms that I mentioned earlier. As Elizabeth said, some colleges will have those forms available that I mentioned early on. Some do not. Some they will share that you need to have them done, but they won't necessarily hand them to you. And so you just need to ask when you're at the orientation if those forms are available, like the FERPA release, something like that is a standard one. I think many colleges, Cathy, you may know, that is a standard one that many colleges will present, but other things there may not be standard at the school that your child is going to. That's unfortunately, and I'm sure all of you who are here listening to this webinar have heard over and over again during this process, it depends on the school. There's not as much uniformity across schools as probably most families would like, but that's okay. The best thing now is you are narrowed down to one, and you can ask all the questions that you want of that one institution. So I would love to say thank you to my co-panelists tonight. I always learn whenever I'm with both of you, and I hope that the attendees learned something tonight and have some tangible takeaways as you launch into this really exciting next step in this process. And again, the next few months are going to fly by for all of you, parents and students alike, and counselors if you're watching too. Hopefully you get a little break in a few months or so. But we wish all of you the very, very best as you navigate through this exciting transition. And please, if we leave you with anything, the most important thing I would say is don't be afraid to ask for help. Ask people on campus if there's something you're not sure of. Please ask the school. Cathy, like I mentioned, is the VP of Enrollment at Dickinson College. I can assure you that if you reach back out to the admission office, if you do not know who to contact, they will direct you. They are, they're welcoming folks, but they know everyone on campus, so they can say, this is the office you need to contact. So don't hesitate to do that. And students, don't hesitate yourselves to be proactive in doing some of those things yourself. So we wish everybody the very best. And thank you, Cathy. Thank you, Elizabeth, for joining me, and good luck to everybody. Have a great rest of your night. Take care.
Thank you.